Welcome back to Year in Review. We'll be briefly talking about the games I did not get a chance to cover. This is not a review, and I would not consider this part of my First Impressions series. With that out of the way, let's get started. Ever hear of a game franchise called Alex Kidd? It started on the Sega Master System, a console that's almost 40 years old. Well, anyway, it recently got a remaster for its first game, and it's kind of weird. I feel like this is a game that is very faithful to the original. This remaster is very faithful to the original. It has some new content for old fans, but at the same time, for new fans, newcomers like me, it's not particularly good, although it is still fun. There are a lot of problems with its design philosophy that hasn't aged well. You know, this is a game that came out 40 years ago that's just being retouched up with some new levels and graphics. Let's start off with something simple, the controls. Now, this game actually, at launch, had some really bad controls, and it only recently got patched. So at launch, the controls were what I would describe as stiff and also slippery. So you would constantly overshoot or undershoot your mark, and Alex would just kind of slide a little bit more across platforms when he landed on something, and that would be a huge problem. Recently, the slipperiness has been removed, but the stiffness still remains, and it's one of these games where when you make a precise jump, when you're trying to land that jump, you're pretty much just rocking the D-pad left and right, or the control stick left and right in mid-air to really try to land that mark. And it's not like, you know, you're playing a platformer where you're in the final few levels and you're really like, oh man, this is a really hard part. I gotta stay focused. I gotta do the D-pad little motion back and forth. I really gotta get into this. No, it starts from the first level, and it's not because, oh, I'm at a really hard point in the game. It's because the controls are not very good. And it's really funny because I actually kind of enjoyed the game to a degree. I think the challenge is actually fine. A lot of people were getting mad at the hitboxes, and I thought they were a little weird, but when I switched it to the old graphics, I didn't have a problem with the hitboxes. It's just how the art's drawn, it's a little bit weird for the remaster for these hitboxes. And you know, it's funny, I actually didn't have much trouble with some of the trial and error aspects of the game. While I did get frustrated by it, the levels are very short. And what I mean by trial and error is that when you encounter an enemy, sometimes you're not sure if you can hit it and it won't kill you, or if it's like invincible and it'll kill you if it touches you. You die in one hit, unfortunately. And I actually didn't have too much of a problem with that because it was very easy to figure out, like, okay, that just killed me, that's annoying, but I do know what not to do later on, you know? Or I do know how to encounter that again, and there's not too many of those in a level, where the levels are usually only a minute long, so you can just blast through them anyway. But the main issue is that the trial and error is one thing, but that stacks on top of the live system. Now, I don't mind the live system too much as I don't mind the trial and error, but when you mix these two things together, it's kind of a disaster. So the live system works that, you know, if you have checkpoints throughout the level, and if you die 3 times, you start at the beginning of the level. You know, level's only a minute or two long, so that's not too bad. In fact, it's usually less than a minute. But the problem is that when you die a certain amount of times, I believe 3 times, you lose all of your money, and you lose all your items that are usable. And these items are used to get through the levels a little bit easier. They give you ranged power-ups, they can give you suits that can fly, and those are really helpful, and you can buy these at shops with money, but if you lose 3 times, you lose all your money, and then you can't, and then when you finally beat the level, you go on to this little middle section where you're like, oh, cool, I can spend my money at this shop. Oh, wait, I don't have any because I died 3 times. Why did I die 3 times? Well, I'd say 2 of those deaths were because of trial and error. Those enemies were a little bit tricky to figure out whether or not they would kill me or not. Sometimes there's a weird platforming segment. There's also, like, just screwy things with the jumping. For example, there's a ceiling in this game, and it's not at the border of the screen. Like most games, you can either jump really high up, and you can jump like way above where the screen borders, or you hit your head on the border of the screen. It makes that very clear. But in Alex Kidd, it's different. There's you could jump a little past the top of the screen, but you know, it's like half an inch. So you hit your head on this invisible ceiling that you don't see. And I know the footage in the background here, you know, I look like I'm playing the game like crap, but I kind of am, because unless you have this controller in your hand, you won't understand just how stiff the character feels. And I know a lot of people on the Steam page are saying, like, oh, it's fine, you know, it's just how I remember it. Well, you know, they're right, because the game always controlled like that. It's not like it's been improved, really. And that's just a subject for another time, another debate. Are you okay with a remaster being laser focused on what the original was, down to the control scheme? Are you okay with it bringing back the difficulty exactly the way it was, for the sake of being faithful? If so, by all means, buy Alex Kidd. I'm happy that you might enjoy it, because it's got some extra levels, it seems like a faithful remaster, and if you played the original, you're probably going to have a good time with this. But for newcomers, I did enjoy it to a degree, because I was starting to get used to the controls, but it's still so goddamn frustrating with the trial and error mixed with the live system, and the controls are just the cherry on top of it. It's so frustrating, and unnecessarily so. I know for a fact the sequels improved upon the controls significantly, and it's a shame to not recommend this, because I really like the art style, I really like the music, and I can just barely recommend this if you're like a die-hard platformer fan, or if you're a fan of the original, but for everyone else, not really, I'm sorry. Anyway guys, thank you very much for watching, I'll see you next time, I'm out.